All right, Chris, you can tell we're close to All In. This was AEW's second to last show, or as everybody says, penultimate these days. And I thought it was a solid, straightforward program that built the key matches that needed to get built. I didn't think it was particularly controversial. I don't think they went for any big hotshot angles that feel like they were desperate. I mean, maybe a few too many references to you have to kill me instead of beat me in the ring. Made sense with Hangman. Was a little much later on. But I want to ask just overall, and then we'll get into the specifics. How are you feeling about the job AEW is doing to build interest on a weekend when WWE is throwing 3 events at people basically for free if you already get WWE events through Peacock? Is this feeling like the show of the year with only one more Dynamite to go?
I would say not so far. I mean, it's okay. I think it's kind of in the middle. I think the really issue is how many matches are going to be on the show. Because I think I've only kind of promoted maybe 4 or 5 matches on the show for All In. And I guess if you include potential tag team title match between the Hurt Syndicate and Jet Speed. But if it's going to be a 7, I assume AEW is going to have more people on the show. I know they have the casino gauntlet, but my only criticism was my typical criticism of AEW is that the matches are too long when the main point's going to be the end angle, and that's the one thing I thought watching this. Like, if you're going to have, now that the match between the Young Bucks and with Bandito and Takeshita wasn't a good match on paper, but if the biggest thing is going to be the 3 minutes afterwards, you don't need to use a 15-minute match, whatever that was, to do that. But other than that, it was an all right show.
And I know Tony Khan looks back on shows when they're finished and often just rattles off, that was a good match. That was a good match. Crowd was into that match. Like, that is part of how he evaluates a show and whether he thinks he succeeded. And I think sometimes the length of the match, as you point out, it's a good match, but when you know the outcome and when the thing, as you said, that matters most is what happens afterwards, it can take away a little bit of the investment in the wrestling. Because, I mean, there's people who just enjoy good wrestling and they don't need anything else. And there's other people who enjoy good wrestling, but they want suspense about the finish and they want it to mean something. And that is I mean, I think that's a consistent challenge for AEW, but I thought that this was pretty much one good athletic match after another that showed off what AEW's strength is in terms of their roster right now. The promos I thought were almost entirely good, and we'll get into just a couple things that maybe booking wise didn't quite come through. But I thought this was Adam Kidd in the chat. Adam Kidd in the chat said solid B- to C+ show for me. I'd have it higher than that. I think it's better than that. But Kyle Fassel says the longer matches are harder to take when they are mostly predictable matches. And so I think when you add predictability to the notion that you bring up, Chris, which is, well, the match is just there to, quote, fill time till we get to a post-match angle, then I think that exacerbates that issue. Ramen Noodle said, too much wrestling in my wrestling. Bart Ty says, good show tonight. Sage, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, says, good show. Looking forward to All In. JC Scooby 1976 says, I have to excuse me, let me slow down so the crowd doesn't mock me like they did John Moxley when he slurred a word or tripped on his words in his promo. JC Scooby 1976 says, I have to say AEW has been getting better lately, surprisingly. Decline says it feels like they're peaking at the right time for this pay-per-view. And let me see if anybody else added anything. Larry from the VDB says thumbs up for tonight's show. Adam Kidd qualified and said, no show is ever an A for me. Well, that seems like a difficult scale. Scott TPA says, great and fun show tonight. So really, I mean, a lot of this is not for people who aren't used to don't watch us a lot, to have a pretty unanimous view of a good to very good show is rare. Even Zach Barber says B+ show for him. So I think that the ingredients on the show, for to look at the format, like I said, normally focus on like a single segment, but I think because we're a week and a half out from All In, let's talk about big picture and the idea that Dynamite might be on in a better spot than they've been, and AEW in general is in a better spot than they've been in a while. But what matters most is, besides the TV deals every few years, is do they entice people to buy the pay-per-view. You got to get people to watch the TV show first and be excited about it and enjoy the wrestling and want to see more high-stakes versions of that wrestling. And like I said, overall, I think that they accomplished that. I thought this show kind of breezed by, and I think they focused on the top matches and the wrestlers who matter the most going into the top matches on AEW. However, Mark Piscatti said that someone looking for a genuine reason to buy All In, this did nothing to make me want to purchase. Actually, I'll add one more comment here from Kyle Fassel and through to you, Chris. I'd enjoy the show a lot more if I believed the mid-card stars to win and knew more about them. It'd be nice to see guys like Beast Mordos go on a winning streak and then face the top stars. Chris, what do you think about some of those comments from the chat and the assessment that I'm making, which I think Dynamite's better off? This was not a red hot show, but I thought it was a very good show. Oh, you're muted, or I muted you. I think you're muted, Chris.
No, I'm muted. I'm muted.
Okay.
A couple of things. One, I just felt I thought it was a bit over the top with the I'm willing to die for this.
Yeah.
I mean
totally. I'm with you on that.
Happened multiple times. I was gonna joke that if I did a shot every time someone said bitch, I would not be in a position to actually be on the show, because that also was a bit too over the top. Yeah, I just feel that generally part of the problem, they had a very good match, for example, the Casino Battle Royal, but there was really no character development for Brody King and Anthony Bowens or AR Fox. And not that it should happen necessarily here, but it should be happening in other shows. And that's kind of the point for me. In the extra 5 minutes, you have a couple of those matches, maybe interview people who aren't on the show who talk about being in the Casino Battle Royal, as opposed to just setting it up as a MJF versus Mark Briscoe singles match, as well as no women who are in there. Have a promo in the back about, I may not be number one, but I'm going to get in and I'm going to win whenever I get in. I think that would help the pay-per-view more than the extra 5 minutes on all those matches.
Yep. Fair comments. Let's pause, introduce ourselves in the show, and then I want to kind of roll through the show chronologically and just look at the pace and the execution of what they're trying to accomplish tonight, and delve more into some of the things you're saying. And I agree with you on the comments about death and the bitchometer, or bitchometer, as Rich Van wants me to call it, having to be reset a couple times in the first half hour. So this is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. I am in Studio B, the North Studio, here on the week of July 4th, enjoying some vacation time while also working, which is just typical for me for the past 35 plus years. No such thing as a non-working vacation for me. But it is fun to settle in as the sun is setting and enjoy a good episode of Dynamite. And that's what we're here to talk about on the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show. I've covered professional wrestling for decades, dating back to actually the late 1980s, when I started the PWTorch weekly newsletter, which still is published on a weekly basis, both in PDF format online and a paper copy, mailed around the world. And I am also the editor of PWTorch.com, a website with news updates and live TV and pay-per-view and PLE coverage, flashback articles, which I think are fascinating to look back at what was going on 5, 10, 20, and sometimes 30 years ago, what 30 years ago Raw reports, my reports on Raw from 30 years ago. So check those out on the site. We also have a lot of great writers contributing. We have live coverage of not just the shows that we cover here on the Post Show, but also NXT, Impact, and more. So I hope you're checking out our website. We also do a ton of podcasts, and many of them are free. The Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Shows run on Monday night, Wednesday night, and Friday night after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown. You can watch us live on the PWTorch YouTube channel or download the shows later that night on our podcast feed. Just search Wade Keller. We did not do, because it's a holiday week, we didn't do the flagship episode on our Blue Logo show, the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcast, as opposed to the post shows. They're two separate feeds. We didn't do a separate flagship this week on Tuesday, but this week, for first time in a while, we're going to have the Fix be simulcast as the flagship. So look for that tomorrow night on the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcast feed. But we're here to talk Dynamite, and my guest co-host is Chris Maitland. He is a PWTorch contributor, including a PWTorch daily cast covering the indie scene. Chris, welcome back to the co-host chair. Good to have you on a Wednesday night. I know it doesn't work out in your schedule too often, so we take advantage of it when we can.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Tell people about your podcast and how they can, well, I'll tell people they can listen. Search PWTorch in your podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Search PWTorch or just Google PWTorch Daily Cast, and you can get to the page to stream the shows and learn more about them. Different show each day of the week with a different theme, different hosts. Chris, tell them about yours.
Sure. I host Wrestling Coast to Coast with my good friend over 25 years, Justin McClelland. We cover a different independent wrestling show every week. Our show typically comes out on Wednesdays, but it'll be coming out on Thursdays. Come out tomorrow. This week we're covering the Jersey Championship Wrestling Show, which is an affiliate of GCW. Their most recent show, rec.sports. Wrestling. It's a Usenet name, very weird. We covered WWE ID, kind of where they are right now. They actually have a show coming up with GCW WrestleMania weekend. GCW using some WWE ID talent. And also, on a personal note, I will be going to Slammiversary in a couple of weeks in the Yes Arena, which is my hometown. First wrestling event there. And I'm taking my dad. So happy about that. But Justin and I talk about different independent show every week. A lot of the wrestlers we talk about end up going to WWE or AEW. We even covered some WWEID wrestlers who appeared on our recent show. So you can check Justin and I out. Typically on Wednesdays, but our show this week will be out tomorrow.
TNA announced they're coming to Minneapolis, Minnesota, coming up late August, early September. It's one of the two. So it's been a long time since TNA's been in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul, or anywhere near this area. So I am looking forward to seeing TNA in person in, I don't know, about 2 months. Rich Fan just attended a TNA Impact taping with his son, which turned his 13-year-old son into a big pro wrestling fan overnight from attending in person. So if you have a kid who you wish was a pro wrestling fan and isn't, a strategy is to take them to a live show, apparently, and something they didn't show a ton of interest in, they can suddenly become a fan of.
Yeah, he's also known as my godson. I think that's what he's mostly known as.
Yes.
What
do you think of Trey becoming a big fan all of a sudden? He went to Raw. He wanted to go to Raw, and he did on Monday night also.
Well, it's something that me and we call ourselves our pit uncles have been trying for years. That's how we met. I met Rich the first day of college, freshman year, soon to be 26 years ago in August. And we started talking about wrestling. And I've been very good friends ever since. So we've been trying to get him into it. The funniest thing is that my oldest daughter, who's 6, I played for her the Joe Hendry theme song, and she actually wanted to go to Slammiversary, but it's a bit late. We're here visiting my parents in New York. But the funniest thing is I showed her the clip of Joe Hendry at WrestleMania, and she goes, "Who's he wrestling?" Because she knew Joe Hendry, did not know who Randy Orton was.
All right, let's get back to our conversation about Dynamite 10. Although, actually, I got distracted by a TNA comment. Kyle Fassel said, I've been to TNA recently, specifically last week's episode. I highly recommend the main event between Santana and AJ Francis. So TNA getting some love here. Check out Darren Lilly's coverage of TNA Impact every week on PWTorch.com. Ramen Noodle said, live wrestling events can turn anybody into a fan. It's like going to the circus. All right. So as I said, I want to get back to, by the way, if you want to call us, if you're a VIP member, you can join us as a live caller on video or audio only. That is, the code is in the caller code or link to be on the show is in my report on Dynamite on the VIP website. And you can also join in the chat. We've been throwing chat comments up. You can also email us at wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. Even if you don't watch us live on YouTube, but you want to be part of the podcast, we will check the inbox and read your email that you send to us, and then you can listen back and see if you made the show. wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. All right. Scott TPA, by the way, says, I'd love to watch TNA, but YouTube TV doesn't carry the channel they air on. Yeah, it's a little bit of a chase to find a carrier that has access to the show, but check out their website if you want to see different ways to watch them. Okay, Chris, let's start with the opening segment and Hangman Page coming out. Good and bad about this Hangman Page promo for me. I get that Hangman wants to come across as passionate, and he succeeds. I feel like Hangman too often is just in 10 out of 10 mode on his promos, both in his delivery and intensity and the words he uses. I like his promos the best when it doesn't come across to me like he thinks the more intense and loud he is, start to finish with no variation, the better the promo is. And I think he thinks the way to have a good promo is to do what nobody else thinks to do, which is to make a super intense face, yell, and say the most extreme things possible the entire time. That said, he's good at it even when he does that. It's just not my favorite approach that he takes. Then he starts talking about, you're going to have to kill me to stop me. And also reset. Well, by the end of it, I'll say this. By the end of it, all the death comments made more sense than I was expecting because he challenged Moxley to a Texas death match. Moxley at first said no, and they eventually agreed to it after some fighting with his crew. So I'm okay with death being invoked if the idea is to set the stage to announce you want a Texas death match. It's not my favorite thing, but it softens the kind of hack nature of saying you're going to have to kill me, or, I'm going to kill you, that kind of thing, which wrestling fans know is not going to happen. Yes, I know it's a figure of speech, but there's other words you can use that convey something that just feels more grounded in realism and less hack and desperate to try to make people think you're serious. But in this case, I was a little more forgiving of it. How do you feel, Chris, about my take on Hangman? That sometimes it's too much at the level 10 the whole time. But when he does it, he's better than most when he makes what I think is a mistake in that sort of monotone, super intense promo the whole time. But because of the context and because he's pretty good at that, I'm more forgiving, but it's still not my favorite approach.
Well, Jon Moxley has tried to kill people on AEW pay-per-view, so that's maybe why he brought that up. But seriously, I think one of the problems with AEW is when they choose to use history. I mean, they have one of their main matches based on a feud that happened in New Japan. But Jon Moxley already wrestled Hangman Page in a Texas death match a couple years ago, and Hangman Page won. So instead of going all out with what he was saying, he should have just said, Moxley, I know I can beat you. I've already beaten you in a Texas death match, and I can beat you again. And it could have gone to Moxley's ego to say, well, maybe you beat me before, but this one's for the title. There's more at stakes. It kind of got to where they went to, but in a more logical way that actually embraces AEW history as opposed to New Japan history from 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, well, I had something with Mox's promo, but I'll.
Well, yeah. So Moxley cut a promo,
yep.
And in the promo he said that he that he lives for pressure, and Hangman, like, it was good for Hangman to win the Owen Hart Cup tournament, but he doesn't like the pressure of being world champion. Whereas Moxley says, I live for the pressure. Crowd chants shut the F up at him. Then he took a shot at CM Punk. He said, people call themselves the best in the world, but that's basic bitch shit. And he said he's much more than that. Very Moxley-like, I guess, to say that. But we had to reset the bitchometer at that point. And he said he is what a world champion looks like, and that Hangman doesn't have what it takes inside. And in order to win a Texas death match. And he said if he agreed to it, Hangman wouldn't walk away from it. Anyway, then we got into Moxley and his crew fighting Hangman. Marina Shafir got involved and went after Hangman. Eventually, Mox agreed. And when Hangman said, give me a Texas death match. And that was after Hangman yanked Shafir to the ground when she was trying to hit him with a briefcase. And then Moxley said, you want it, you got it, Texas death. And then Excalibur said, okay, that makes it official. And then at that point, the punctuation mark at the end of the promo was Hangman answering Mox saying, you don't have what it takes. Hangman going, you want to know how far I'll go? And I thought they're going to show footage of like houses burning down or invading people's homes. But instead, he gave Marina Shafir a buckshot lariat. Taz said, what the hell? And that was basically a message to Moxley to say, hey, look how far I'll go. I'll hit Marina Shafir with a buckshot. So what do you think of the Moxley aspect of this promo, Chris? And what did you think of the ending, that kind of punctuation mark at the end with a buckshot on a woman, Marina Shafir, which you don't see all that often in wrestling, a man hitting a woman with his finisher?
This is the second time, I believe, Jon Moxley in a feud he did the same thing with Swerve, where he cut a promo that didn't recognize that the person he was talking about was the champion before. He cut a great promo against someone who'd never been the champion, but Hangman Page is a former champion, so saying that he can't live up to it or he can't get there is not the truth, because he has in AEW. Additionally, I don't see there's nothing more than saying that we are not pretending you're not obsessed with CM Punk than bringing him up on a promo to sell at your probably most watched segment on the show, to sell your big stadium main event. CM Punk shouldn't matter. You shouldn't be bringing him up at all. Just focus on the match at hand, unless he's coming all in, which I doubt.
I would highly doubt that. Yeah,
shouldn't be bringing him up. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm someone who's, because we cover independent wrestling, Justin and I've covered a lot more intergender matches than I watched previously, and I've kind of been able to accept them in certain instances more than I could have probably before we started doing Wrestling Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
I just thought that whole ending was, the ops came out when he got back up. It's like, why? How do they know that Claudio and Yuto are going to beat him indefinitely? There's so many things here, like logically, that didn't make sense, as well as her taking the buckshot Larry. It just happened to work out that she stood in the middle of the ring, and all these things are just sort of happenstance to kind of get a cool moment. If you think about it for a second, the logic really falls apart, and that's kind of where I feel AEW struggles with. I just feel that it would have been much easier, but you maybe wouldn't have had a viral moment if you just mentioned their history and mentioned the fact that Moxley's ego has him think that he can beat Hangman this time, even though he lost to him before.
So, a couple of things here. The chat is saying they missed the CM Punk reference. Do you agree with me when he said people call themselves best in the world, but that's basic bitch shit? That was alluding to CM Punk. He didn't mention Punk by name, or do you look at that as a reference to others who have used that phrase?
Will Ospreay's used it, but I just don't think. Moxley and Punk have had publicly known animosity towards each other or differences of opinion.
Yeah.
So, and Moxley seems like the type of person who would mention that at this time. To me, I went by pretty quickly, but to me, it's kind of a line doesn't really serve a purpose in what they're trying to do, and it really had no point at this point.
Yeah, I think in a way, it's just, I think Moxley as a champion of a competing brand, trying to just establish, I'm a next level type champion. I'm not a guy who just is the best wrestler in the world. That's basic bitch shit. I am Moxley. You won't survive a Texas death match with me. I'm at another level. I think that there was something to it. I don't know if this is a joke line or not, but San Francisco Niners fan 23 said maybe he meant Jericho too. My hunch is it's aimed at anybody who used that phrase, but I think it's a little extra for CM Punk. Derek Mitchell says, yes, that was totally in reference to CM Punk. In my opinion, two of CM Punk's heated moments involve Page and Moxley. So, not to get in the minutia of it, I'm Chris, I think it can be distracting. To me, it didn't feel totally extraneous. It seemed like Moxley's going, people who say they're the best in the world, I think he's acknowledging multiple people say that. He's trying to say I'm at another level. You will not survive a Texas death match with me.
I guess my only argument is Hangman Page isn't one of them. And that's
right. Yeah, I know.
So, if he was wrestling Will Ospreay or Chris Jericho or Bryan Danielson, some of the people that were mentioned in the chat, I could get that. But you're not wrestling someone who calls himself the best in the world. He just said that he's willing to die for the match. That's what he's hanging his head on. So hang his hat on. So that's what you should focus on.
Yep. All right. Anything else from Hangman Moxley specifically about the segment tonight?
No, I think I've talked about it a couple times.
Yep. Good. So let's go to the Mina Shirakawa challenging Mercedes Moné for the TBS title. We had Toni Storm at ringside for this one. Mercedes won in 15 minutes. Mercedes went after Shirakawa afterwards, and then Storm entered to check on her. Mercedes hit Storm from behind with her belt. Then she went to ringside and licked some icing on a cake and threw a drink at Luther. Then she left with her title held high. Just basic stuff. Get Mercedes out there. Toni Storm sitting ringside. Mercedes has been sitting ringside with food. This time it was Toni. What do you think the intent was of this story in terms of building that match up? And do you think they succeeded?
Yeah, I think it was too long. I think the intent was to be, Moné wins again, as she always wins, even when Mina had a lot of the offense. I just don't think that story could be told in a 10-minute match or 8-minute match. I don't know. Moné is the belt collector, so to speak, but they showed her as someone who won kind of almost not by fluke, but kind of barely. And I don't know if that's the way I would have thought this match that's been brought up or been built up for several months was going to be two unbeatable forces. Not here's someone who can barely beat Toni Storm's friend. don't know if that's sort of the best way to put that forward.
The chat, let's see, King of Strong Style says, the match was a waste of time. We all know Mercedes wasn't going to lose. Kyle Fassel said the match was fine, but predictable. King of Strong Style says, just have the match already. The build to this women's championship has been poor. Zach Barber says, Mina's kick to the back of Mercedes' head was nasty. And yeah, so, I mean, the idea of it crossed my mind that they might have Mercedes lose the TBS title before going after Toni Storm at All In, to kind of have Mercedes as the belt collector just kind of flip out and freak out and make it seem like, well, now she lost a very important belt. Now she wants to go after the one Toni Storm says is more important than all the other ones combined, which is what Toni Storm should be saying. So when people say the match was predictable, I talked to myself into a possibility that with Toni Storm at ringside, that there could be something that would lead to even a short-term switch to Mina, even if that just set up a rematch for Mercedes getting it back after All In. I don't know how many viewers were thinking that. I mean, it was a long shot, but I was like, maybe that's why they're having this. And instead they had it because Tony Khan likes title matches, and they wanted to have an excuse to have Mercedes and Tony interact. Your thoughts on that aspect of it, the predictability?
Yeah, I think it was predictable. I don't think it would make sense to have Mercedes lose, because I think the story for this match is she's won all these belts all throughout the world as Excalibur riled them off at the beginning of the match. But can she beat the AEW World Champion? That's the one title that she hasn't held, even though she's been in AEW for a year. So having her lose, I know there's a comment on me about having that kind of criticizing me for saying that the women's match will only go 8 minutes. A couple things on that. One, they could have booked more than one women's match, and two, they could have had other segments with women to get them over for the women's casino gauntlet. So I think that, again, the match was fine, but again, the most important thing really was at the end when she hit Toni Storm with the belt, and Toni was being. It also was very odd that Toni was being so subdued after having that commercial with Rachel Brosnahan, where she's like kind of all over the place, and then she comes out like she's heard that a family member is very sick. It was just very, very odd.
Well, let's talk about this. What did you make of the Superman tie-in? Heroes versus couple tag matches, heroes versus villains. Some people involved in the Superman movie interacting with AW wrestlers, Toni Storm later in the show, Kenny Omega and MJF. We've seen movie tie-ins that are awful and embarrassing and make wrestling fans just roll their eyes and shake their head. I don't think this crossed into that territory. I think this felt like somebody with a sense of what pro wrestling fans want in their product, the tone they look for. I don't think this broke it too much, other than the example you give of maybe a change in tone being somewhat jarring.
Yeah, I thought it was fine to have that. I would have, again, maybe paced that out different, have that at least one segment with Toni Storm at a different part of the show. Yeah, but I think it's a good important. I just think, again, like the villains, how villainous are Jalistico and Beast Mortos. They never really win. I think this is part of the AEW thing of like every week building people up because you might need them later. If you had better villains or more credible villains, then it would be more of a heroes versus villains match.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on the Superman tie-ins?
No.
Yeah. But nothing.
But they were fine.
Yeah, I mean, I was bracing for something worse and or something bad. That'd just be like, RoboCop nonsense or Shazam or whatever. And this just felt like, okay, I'm more aware there's a Superman movie, and that's the goal. And I guess they each kind of gave each other a little bit of a rub. So yeah.
It's going to be very hard to be worse than RoboCop. That's legendary. Yeah.
Oh God, yes. All right. So we had Matthew and Nicholas Jackson at an airport, and Matthew surprised Nicholas with a new limousine that had decals that were talking about them being founding fathers. And he said he bought it with Tony Khan's credit card. The back of the limo is filled with shoeboxes. Nicholas said, it's great having all this power. And Matthew said, yeah, let's ride around and enjoy our spots in our childhood, like landmarks in our hometown. So a video showed them driving around to different landmarks, reminiscing about their childhood. They swung on a swing set that they apparently did when they were little kids. And Nicholas took a shot at their hometown, saying they might be the only famous people from there. After a break, they went to their home where they grew up, hugged some people who were there, and Matthew just said it seemed bigger back in the day. So the point of this was, I venture to say, to show the Bucks flaunting the perks of being EVPs and their arrogance, and make people want to see them lose their EVP title status. And then we had the Young Bucks against Takeshi against Bandito, Kyle O'Reilly. The Young Bucks and Takeshi against Bandito, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong. This was one of the heroes and villains matches. This one went about 12 minutes. The Bucks and Takeshi won. Then we got the angle afterwards with Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay charging into the ring and saying, we didn't get an answer. We want one. And the Bucks said, we need something to entice us to put our EVP titles on the line. And Ospreay told Swerve, trust me. And he said, if you beat us, we won't challenge for the tag titles for a full year. Swerve didn't like that at first, but and the Bucks delighted in seeing them disagreeing, and so they agreed to the stip. So if the Bucks lose it all in, they lose their EVP title status. But if the Bucks win, then Ospreay and Swerve cannot challenge for the tag team titles for 1 year. To me, this was I would have come up with something more to get the Bucks to. I don't think the scenario of the Bucks putting their EVP status at risk felt believable. I don't think they would. They have no reason to, and I don't think they care that much about the Bucks or the Ospreay and Swerve getting a tag title shot. I wish the stakes were higher, or the Bucks had been sort of tricked or goaded into it in a way that felt more believable. Wasn't awful, but I was kind of left going, I'm not buying this. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was sort of like, because they already started on that line about giving up the EVP title, that they had to come up with something for Swerve and Ospreay to give up. I think the whole...
And I like that, by the way. I mean, like, that's a positive that they addressed that they didn't just say yes. I just wish they did a better job.
And they didn't say, oh, we'll never get it, because that's kind of ridiculous. But to me also, my problem with this is kind of, well, I've been on this, not a big fan of the Young Bucks. To me, I find it kind of, for me personally, ridiculous that these two of the biggest stars that AEW has are teaming together, and they're not going after the tag team title. That's more important for them to go after the Young Bucks EVP title. Mm-hmm. Just doesn't really make sense to me. And also with the weird thing about the Young Bucks can make matches and make them wrestle earlier, but they can't force them to give up the title shot. They had to agree to it. It's sort of like the logic thing. And Tony Khan made that a Texas Death Match immediately after the Moxley Page segment, but can't he do that with this match? The whole logic gap there is really hard for me to take at times.
Yeah, I'll throw a couple chat comments, then I'll add my thoughts. Eldred Ryan says, 2 non-tag team wrestlers can't challenge for the tag titles for a year. How does that make sense? Derek Mitchell points out the history of this. Why is the most notable thing in AEW not to challenge for a world title like Cody Rhodes, Will Ospreay, and Swerve? I know we got an email on that too we'll get to. Ramen Noodle says, I think Swerve and Ospreay lose as well, so they aren't looking over Hangman's shoulder. Kyle Passel also acknowledges the Cody thing. I remember someone that once said they could never challenge for the world title. LOL. Darrell says, why would the Bucks care about them giving up a year of not going after the tag titles? Why would that matter to the Bucks? Because they can keep them away from it anyway, because they're EVPs, and that is the big logic hole. And King of Strong still said, wait, so if they lose, they can't go for the tag or singles. My understanding was the tag titles. Chat, jump in if you think there's any ambiguity there. Now, Kyle Fassel said, I'm not a big fan of the title stip, but I'm just happy there are stakes in the match. And Ramen Noodle defends this and says there is no logic gap. The Bucks are EVPs. Moxley doesn't have that power. So yeah, Kyle Fassel said he thought it was a world title. So Chris, help me out here. People are saying it was the world title, not the tag team titles.
Yeah, I thought they meant the world title. They couldn't challenge for the AEW world title if they lost.
Oh, okay. So that's my mistake. And I want to recalibrate this for a second. was it ambiguous and I misinterpreted it, or was it obvious and I misinterpreted it to the best of your knowledge?
I thought it was clear. I think part of the problem is Will Ospreay has a London accent and he talks very fast.
Yeah.
And I think that might be part of how it.
Okay. Well, I'll lean on that as my excuse. Let's just go with that. So correcting my thing. So I actually want to rethink this now. Because they're teaming up as a tag team, but they can't challenge for tag titles. It felt like a stretch to me. Why would they care, right? We can't challenge for the world title when they both aspire to win the world title. So this is actually a lot more. Let's see. Zach Barber's taking the dig. He goes, "No, it's obvious that you misunderstood." Anyway, LOL. I actually think that stake doesn't just feel like they're throwing something in there like the tag titles, which didn't make a lot of sense even though they are a tag team. Ospreay and Swerve want the world title. So now this is intriguing. And so either the Bucks are going to lose EVP status, or Tony Khan will not have the dilemma of not being able to go after, and he'll lose the challenge he has as a booker of trying to keep Ospreay and Swerve out of the world title picture. And then it builds up anticipation for them getting it later. And that explains Derek Mitchell's comment earlier that it didn't make sense to me because I misinterpreted the stip. He goes, "I think we'll have to wait another year until Will Ospreay is crowned AEW World Champion at All In London 2026. So if I assume that's at least a full year away to match the stipulation, but that could explain if the Bucks retain their EVP title status, that would delay Ospreay storyline-wise having any ability to get that title shot, and also build up frustration with Swerve, but give Swerve a reason to go after something different, and then clear the path for Hangman as a lead babyface world champion if he ends Moxley's reign, which I think is the likely scenario. Then that puts Hangman in a position to defend it against essentially a string of top heels without having to explain why Swerve and Ospreay aren't going after it. So, Chris, your thoughts on that now that I'm kind of recalibrating my thoughts, because I totally botched that.
My only question why I don't think that the Swerve and Ospreay will lose is how are they booked, or who are they facing for the year that they can't face for the world? They can't wrestle for the world title. I think that would be a big AEW crutch problem that they'd have, because they don't have too many heels that they would need to wrestle. They're both baby faces. Maybe one could turn. They could probably feud for a while, but having this set up to be, they can't wrestle. Are they not going to be in any of the various tournaments that get title shots? Or
yeah,
no gauntlet matches, because
pretty much no.
Well, if I won, yeah, I can't wrestle. So I just don't. It's too much of a booking difficulty.
Yeah,
if they don't win.
So we'll add to this because some people are commenting, even though now I'm like, okay, I get this more. It seems like the stakes at least match somewhat. Chris J said it seemed like they were saying world title to me, but that doesn't make any sense either, though. Why would a tag team, the Bucks, care about Swerve and Hangman losing a chance to go after the world title? What's the answer to that, Chris? Does it? Yeah, I mean, what's your best guess for that? That they expect?
Their thinking is because of that. They're not going to be on the same page, and they won't do as well as a team because Swerve obviously was not on board with that. So I think their logic is, we'll accept this challenge because it will hurt them. They won't perform as well as a team if the stipulation exists.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Because that was built into I think it was Matthew's reaction. Like, ha, you guys are you guys are at each other's throats over this. We do that so we have a better chance to win and retain our status. Now, the Bucks don't need to rattle Swerve and Ospreay to protect their EVP status. They could just say no to putting it at stake. So we still need to believe that they would have a strong motivation to keep Swerve and Ospreay away from the singles world title picture. So I still think that's a weak part of this. Ramen Noodle says the Bucks care because they hate Ospreay and Swerve, and they want to take something away from them that they want. And I mean, that is obviously the case. It's just, is it enough that they just hate Swerve and Ospreay? So if you're willing to put that at stake, we'll put EVP titles at stake because we know we can win, especially if you guys aren't getting along. And if you guys aren't getting along and now we knock you out of the world title picture, that's going to make us feel good because you're going to be angry that you lost to us. So, I mean, I don't know. I can talk myself into being okay with this. Now, I do want to say we've only talked about if the Bucks win, but the Bucks could still lose. I mean, this may not be to kick down the road Ospreay getting a title shot. And the Bucks could lose EVP status, which, by the way, I'm not against. I don't like wrestlers. I haven't liked from the beginning. I've been on record from the beginning. I don't think they should have ever acknowledged Cody, Kenny, and the Bucks were EVPs, even if they were in real life. I don't like active wrestlers. I mean, it's like, LeBron James being the commissioner of the NBA and helping to facilitate a trade or changing the rules to the salary cap so we can go to a team so we can win a title to end his career or whatever. It's like, that's ridiculous. It would be stupid. And I just, especially when they're heels, but even as faces, I didn't like it. So I don't like the Bucks having EVP status. So part of me is just rooting for them to lose it. But then, I think Kenny's storyline still in canon still has EVP status, but he doesn't really flex it at all, and they don't really talk about it. So I don't know, Chris, any other thoughts on this? I've kind of thought out loud my thoughts as I've gotten updated on what was said tonight.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where they should have had a better way to do this match. There should have been another stipulation, not a stipulation, but another reason. They could have just, we interfered in a match. Some other reason we want to wrestle on this big stage. When you do this type of stuff here with, moving EVP status, not being able to challenge for a title, it gets kind of convoluted. One other thing that just came to my mind, I forgot, which we should have brought up, the Page Moxley thing, is that Page looked like he was going to stab Moxley with a fork, and he paused, hesitated till Yuta broke it up, and it's like,
yeah. Well, didn't Moxley block it?
He did, but the way he did it is like Moxley, they have this punching, they're punching each other. Page gets on top, and then he pauses, Moxley pauses, gets to pull the fork out of his jacket or whatever, and then Yuta broke it up. But to me, sort of like, I don't know why. Shouldn't have done that, I guess.
Yeah. The Bucks haven't been flexing their EVP power storyline wise lately, but they were flaunting it tonight, flaunting TK's credit card. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's either they're going to Ospreay and Swerve are going to lose their chance to get a world title. The Bucks will get heat for however they win. There's, Jack Perry. I reported this in kind of my little scoops corner of the Newswire and the Pro Wrestling Torch sort of last week, that I've been asking around because people are asking me what's up with Jack Perry, and I was just told, yeah, he's still in the plans. He's still in the plans. It's not like Britt Baker. I called that at that report 6 months ago that she was on the outs, and now I broke that story that AEW wasn't interested in bringing her back. That a few things had happened where she just kind of management just threw up their hands and said we're done with her, and now she's starting to really realize that and wants out of her contract. Reportedly, some other reports on that. I haven't verified that independently. But when it comes to Jack Perry, even though Perry could be the guy who Tony Khan ultimately feels cost him CM Punk, he's not in the same boat. They do have plans to bring him back into AEW proper. And it could be, and I'm not reporting this, I have no insight on this, but he could be the guy who costs Ospreay and Swerve the match if his return, which is in the plans, but I don't know the specific plans, his return is then. And that would explain why they've kept him off TV so long, because that'd be a big moment for him to return. And then that would set up Ospreay or Swerve or both feuding with Jack Perry in pair of one-on-one feuds too. So there's some ways to get out of it, and then the Bucks just get their EV power back, even if it isn't super clear what that EV power entails, since Tony Khan has seemingly veto power. I'm trying to think, did they cover that in canon? Maybe Zach Barber remembers, if you don't, Chris, that there's something about the EV, they have some sort of ironclad power that Tony Khan can't take away from them. I don't know. I don't even know if they remember. I barely remember.
They can clearly. I mean, but we're also supposed to agree that or accept that Tony Khan signed away the right for them to use his credit cards.
Well, that's
that they flaunted on TV.
Yes, I know. I mean, Tony Khan should be Tony. If it's anything like my credit cards, he's getting texts going, "Did you authorize this expense? Did you authorize this expense?" Although when you're a billionaire, maybe the credit card company gives up on worrying about your unauthorized expenses, because a limousine is small change compared to private jets and yachts or whatever. I don't know if Tony Khan has a yacht. I think his dad. Does his dad have it? I think his dad has a yacht. Yeah, his dad has a. Yeah, I think he replaced it twice to get cooler ones. But Zach Barber did say, since I called him out and asked him, I should say, no way, they've never clearly defined the Bucks' power. But Zach, I think there was a time where the Bucks said something when they were flexing their power that they had ironclad control over something. Ramen Noodle says they confirmed they can't fire them because of ironclad contracts. So that's the thing that I'm remembering, and I couldn't remember specifically. Thank you, Ramen, for that memory. So that was Tony Khan can't fire us because we have ironclad contracts, but it didn't relate to their power. It just related to them not being able to be fired. So yeah, it's a little. I mean, it's been sloppy from the beginning, Chris. The whole EVP status.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's taken 10 of us 10 minutes to kind of figure out exactly what this means just shows how convoluted it is in the first place, because it shouldn't warrant that much discussion.
I agree with that, but there are times that I talk about something for 10 minutes and it's clear to other people and not me. I mean, sometimes I just miss like the day. So I'll be self-deprecating in that sense and humble that. There are occasions where I don't understand something that most people get. I just need a few extra minutes. Hopefully that's not too common. I'm with you on this one. They clearly haven't done the EVP stuff. Chris, are you going to try to get your camera back on or did it go out? It's been out for a little while. I assume you know.
Yeah, I'm getting it back on. I have to plug in my phone. My laptop's dying, so I'll have it back on in a moment.
Sure. Yep. No problem. Good. Ramen Noodle goes, I didn't need any help remembering. All right. So let's by the way, entertainment value wise, let's set aside the logic and the history and all that. I think the Bucks, as obnoxious EVP, power hungry, flaunting their money heels, is character work for them. And I enjoy it. I'm kind of buying it in the canon of AEW. And fortunately, the Young Bucks aren't going on like the Late Show with Stephen Colbert and flaunting that they're completely different than their other characters. Like, I don't believe they're putting stuff out there that contradicts this. So I'm not saying that people believe Nick and Matt in real life are bad people flaunting money and spending Tony Khan's money. That's not my point. My point is they're not throwing in our faces something totally contradicting that. And so you're more able to kind of just lose yourself in that world and in their characters. And I think, for me, it's working. I think they're doing good heel work. Kyle Fassel says, yeah, the Young Bucks best character work has been as heels. Chris, how do you feel about that? Because I want to give them credit, if it's called for here, even if we don't love the angle, that the performances in character work is good.
I think it's very easy for them to be heels because they're quite unlikable. I think it's easier characters for them to play than baby faces.
And you think they're unlikable in real life because of the CM Punk stuff, or are you just saying the way that they carry themselves works better as heels in terms of on-air characters? I just want to. Are you saying in real life they're unlikable, or you're saying their wrestling characters overall are, or both?
Both. I think they. I mean, I had to text Rich Fan of PWTorch when I don't know, it's pro wrestling, hyperbole, but when Tony Schiavone said that they were like the best tag team of all time a few weeks ago. I just texted him the number of tag teams that Tony Schiavone covered, not all-time tag teams, but just tag teams that Tony Schiavone covered as a commentator in WCW, NWA, WWE, even for the year. And I just feel that they are the most overrated wrestling act of all time, with the fact of how they are talked about as stars. Not that they haven't had good matches or people don't like them, but they've been kind of put on a pedestal in a way that they're really have never actually reached in reality from any kind of metric standpoint. And they're also very swarmy because they act like these huge stars that they are not. And that's why I find them to be very unlikable. And I think they can definitely hone in on that as heels. It's harder to do that, to be likable baby faces.
Yep. The idea of declaring them the best tag team in the world, if you're AEW, I think is fair. It's a stretch and it's dangerous, but it's fair in the canon of AEW to say that because the Bucks have been there for the beginning. They've been tag champs. They have great matches. They've been in the ring for some of their biggest shows and top matches. And if you want to say they're the best tag team ever, and the longer you're a wrestling fan, I don't know if this relates a lot or not, but the stretch of great tag teams, the Road Warriors, the Midnight Express, the Freebirds at their peak, the Von Erichs. I don't even know who's on your list. I'm just rattling off some names of sort of 80s era, a glory period of tag team wrestling, the British Bulldogs and Demolition and the Hart Foundation. I love that era of the WWF mid to late 80s. And then you had Edge and Christian and the Dudleys and all that in WWF, which I don't think was as good, but I get it. I mean, I don't think it's crazy to have that argument. And ECW had their own narrative of who the best tag team was and all that. So I think I don't blame a company for saying, you know what, who's the best, most consistent team in our canon, our world? Let's tout them as the best ever. I don't think it's like just a spit take to say that about the Bucks. But I think if you don't work for AEW, if you're not on their payroll and you're looking at wrestling history, I'm with you, Chris, for sure. Bullet point for bullet point on, I don't think, if we agree to the metrics, should include being household names, drawing big crowds, being seen by gigantic audiences. I don't think it's a mile of difference between them and whoever else you want to discuss, but I think saying they're the greatest is still a stretch. So Chris, your thoughts on anything I rattled off there?
I will put it this way. I never thought they were as good a tag team as the Briscoes. So if they're not as good as tag team as the Briscoes, and no one would say the Briscoes are the greatest. This is not Jerry and
Mark and
not Jerry and Jack Briscoe, but Mark and Jay Briscoe. I never thought they were better than them, and no one would say that they were a better tag team than these other ones you mentioned. So that's kind of where my reference is. It's not even about the Hart Foundation or Midnight Express. It's about the Briscoes. I think the Briscoes.
I love that. I remember interviewing Jim Ross. I multiple times said, but it stands out to me for some reason when Jim Ross talking about how I think the Briscoes were. I've said this to many people, but the Briscoes were the best act for the longest time to never be part of a top tier national US or Japan company. Like in terms of being this, like they just had this body of work in Ring of Honor that you could make a case that if you take away crowd size, TV ratings, being a household name, and you just focus on body of work and being a super important tag team within the canon, within the narrative structure of the company that you worked for, and that company is a big enough deal to not be irrelevant or just a blip, and ROH certainly was more than that. The Briscoes were like the best non-household name to most wrestling fans who had the best career over the course of a decade plus. And then if you just sat down and said the only metric I care about is crowd heat and matches that feel epic when I watch them, and you put a top 20 Briscoes tag teams matches up against the Young Bucks top 20 tag team matches, there might be some stylistic debates, but I think the Briscoes would be the more compelling argument.
Yeah, I just feel that they weren't promoted by certain journalists more than the Briscoes were, and I just think for me that I don't compare the Young Bucks to, again, all these other tag teams I watched as a kid in the 80s or 90s. I just think that a tag team of the same era that wrestled in the same promotion, and I saw them wrestle live quite a few times, were better. Yep,
I love the Briscoes tag team matches and their personas. They were credible. They were a legit main event tag team act, and you just don't, a lot of tag teams felt like they were, even the Hart Foundation at their best, were a secondary act within the company that they work for. The Road Warriors rose above that. I'd argue that Ron Eriks, of course, rose above that in their territory. But the Briscoes felt like the top act to me, even with the rotation of some really good. And there were times where like the ROH World title, singles title felt bigger, like CM Punk and Samoa Joe, for instance. But overall, the Briscoes were a mainstay main event act, even when they were singles. They pulled it off too, especially Jay. Okay. So Ramen Noodle says, best tag team in the world is a gimmick, just like best in the world. Weird thing to be so resentful of. Markish behavior, respectfully. Well, respectfully, Ramen Noodle, you're in. No, I'm kidding. We welcome all opinions.
But also, just to be critical.
Yes.
Tony Schiavone called them, like CM Punk called himself the best in the world, is self-proclaimed. When Tony Schiavone called them the best in the world. So when Tony Schiavone, who's commented for a very long time, says it, it's not just behaviors. It's him trying to say that they are the best in the world. And because it's a commentator saying it, it's easy for us to maybe agree or disagree.
And I phrased it in Ramadou, I think is aiming his comments at you, Chris, because I think I'm covered with this. I'll put it back up. I said I don't have a problem with the wrestling company, even the announcer, saying this prominent tag team that's been here from the beginning is the best tag team of all time. That's fine. Wrestling promoters, announcers, and wrestlers, they hype, they overhype, they build. But that doesn't mean we have to buy into that narrative. And I think people who, again, aren't on payroll, don't work for the company, they also have said that. There's some prominent people who have put the Bucks on that pedestal, and that can make it a little more annoying when then the company does it, if it feels like, oh, this isn't just hype, but we're supposed to believe this is real. And this is not disrespect to the Bucks. I mean, there's things I like about their style, and I've enjoyed the hell out of some of their matches, but there's also things I disagree. I mean, I'm closer to the Jim Ross school of tag team wrestling. Who's a legal man? And let's stop just sitting, spamming finishers and spots and popping up and stuff. But they're super exciting, and they're great athletes, especially Nick, but I mean Matt too. I don't want to disparage them just because I disagree with them being the best in the world, but I think there are people who buy into that the same way. Paul Heyman would hype his tag teams as the best in the business at the time, and it's like, yeah, it's just a promoter hyping things, but fans would buy into the idea that the top tag team in AEW was at that level.
Yeah, my only thing is that there's a difference between a manager or even the team doing itself, or when the supposedly neutral commentator does it. That's where my argument is, because and he's fine to have that opinion. I just can't believe that someone that called the Midnight Express and the Steiner brothers think that the Young Bucks are better. But hey, AEW does not employ me, so maybe if they did, I would have a different opinion.
I think I would have the Young Bucks higher than the Steiners on a non-working for the pro wrestling company scale. I think the Steiners are really good. I think the body of work, I don't know. I mean, the Steiners had a this is a whole sidebar here, but I don't think the Steiners had a great run in the WWF, and WCW wasn't the top company when they were, and they weren't like centerpiece main event X for very long. I don't know. I mean, this is like, pizza versus a really good burger. I mean, it's like you can like both and have one that you like more, but I don't know. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
There are several Ring of Honor tag teams you could put up there with the Young Bucks, whether they be obviously the Briscoes, Haas and Benjamin, Hero and Claudio Castagnoli, and a few others. You could put up there. In New Japan, they were juniors. They won the IWGP towards the end when the Ring of Honor, but they were never even pushed in Japan as a big tag team, which the Steiners were. And then the Steiners.
Okay. No, fair enough. If you add Japan to the mix, I mean, you can build their resume up. Anyway, Rich Fan jumped in and says, I can confirm that Chris has held this view for a long time. So, welcome, Rich, to the chat. Good to see you. I recorded Everything with Rich and Wade, the VIP show yesterday. We had a good time talking about a wide array of topics, and then Rich was with me with his son Trey as our on-site correspondent on the Raw Post show. So if you haven't seen that yet, check that out on our podcast side of things or on our YouTube channel. Okay, I could go on. I love tag team wrestling, and I love talking about the different eras. And it's so subjective, but there are some things that you can bring up in this discussion that give your argument some credibility as long as the terms and the parameters are defined. I think we're at a good point to move. Oh, and by the way, Ramen Noodle agreed with me. It's you, not me. He said, "You are good, Wade." That was for Chris in the chat. Ramen Noodle's comment.
It's okay. I will. I'm very, as Rich says, I'm very upfront about my dislike of the Young Bucks, and I have various reasons why.
Yes. Ramen Noodle says Tony Schiavone is a character in a TV show doing a job. Yeah, but it's still the narrative. He's doing a job, but you in the narrative, is it ridiculous to say it? If somebody said Zack Ryder and Mojo Rawley are the greatest tag team in WWE history, and it was an announcer quote just on payroll saying it, it would be so ludicrous it'd be worthy of criticism. You wouldn't just go, well, it's the job of an announcer to hype a tag team. So the idea is it ludicrous or at least a stretch to say that about the Bucks? And Chris believes it is. Okay. Let's. All right, so let's get back to Dynamite here. And so, after Swerve and Ospreay were disagreeing, they cut to a break, or Swerve was getting on Ospreay's face, and then they came back from the break, and they were still in the ring, still bickering a bit, but then Dralistico and the Beast Mordos battled, had a tag match with them. Ospreay and Swerve ended up winning, and then they shook hands and hugged afterwards. The storyline of this match was, I guess, if Ospreay and Swerve can beat Mordos and Dralistico, maybe they can get over maybe Swerve will get over the idea that Ospreay just anteed up something that he didn't agree to ahead of time. Did you like the way that story was told? Do you think I represented it well?
I thought you did represent it well. I thought it should have been. You're welcome. I guess it was they just went quickly from Swerve's unhappy to like, oh, we won this match against two guys who aren't a tag team, so I'm not unhappy anymore. I just don't know if they'll bring that up again, or they've completely moved on from him being upset, and they're just going to have a straight match with the Young Bucks.
Yeah. Okay, so then we have a is that did we cover everything other than the main event? Oh, we've got still got to talk about jet speed and stuff. I guess
the jet speed and the 4-way for the number 2 spot in the gauntlet.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I realize that now. So I scrolled past it and I was like, yeah, there's no way we covered everything. So let's let's talk about Ibushi and Okada first, and we'll go to Hurt Syndicate and all that and jet speed afterwards. I definitely want to talk about the jet speed thing. I went back and forth on what I thought of that. So I want to flesh that out a little bit with you. Okay, so main event, Kota Ibushi and Okada, Don Callis and Lance Archer at ringside. The bell rang 51 minutes into the hour, but of course they had an overrun. They ended up going 18 minutes roughly. Okada won this one. Back and forth battle. And Okada got a clean win. I'm glad Archer. I don't think Archer got physically involved, right? He was just standing at ringside. It was the post-match only. So, yeah. So this is pretty straightforward. But the crowd is chanting for Ibushi. When the bell rang, they chanted "Holy shit" as those two were squaring off. I thought the announcers did a good job talking about their history and especially the Ibushi Okada history, or excuse me, the Ibushi Omega history, to kind of build up the idea that this relates to the Omega Okada match. And then the big angle to end the show is Kenny Omega making his return for the first time since he was spitting up blood and nearly perhaps on his way to death in front of our very eyes after being elbow dropped through a table by Okada. He is fine. He is full of energy, full of vigor. It looks like he should be physically cleared for the match. They were kind of playing up a little bit, will he make it? Will he even be alive for that? So yeah, I thought it was it was part of what I liked about the show. Is I just thought it was a good logical booking 101 thing. Omega makes the save to keep Ibushi from getting unfairly beat up by Okada and his new crew, the new Don Callis crew, and it worked for me. How about you, Chris?
I thought it was fine. I think my only concern sometimes with AEW is playing the greatest hits of people, a little bit years past their best work. I definitely think that for Ibushi to have, I guess, only his second match back, and he was out for a long time. He looked to be in a bit better shape than the last time I saw him, and that really helped. But I think the issue with Okada is that they haven't presented Okada as a serious wrestler for most of his time in AEW, and your entire opinion of him is based on where you saw him previously, and I just think that hurts overall, because to get the most out of Okada, you had to have been a New Japan fan from about 2012 to 2023.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's a lot. I would like AEW, and I think they're getting there, to have what they want AEW viewers to care about being part of AEW proper, or a callback to something, and I think it's fair game, a callback to something that was seen by an even larger audience with WWE, instead of expecting their audience to care because they were in PWG or New Japan, or for that matter, ECW or something like that. Like, I want AEW's own history, I want to matter more than what happened in 2018 or 2019, but they're getting there. Now, that said, I'm okay with a sprinkle of, hey, this happened in Japan, and that's where Kenny's history is. It's well established. Kenny's prime peak years were there. He was genuinely friends with Ibushi. Okada is obviously a huge star in Japan. I think this is a time to play that up. I just don't like when it's overdone. But, the Hangman, Swerve, Ospreay stuff, that's AEW-centric. Even the Young Bucks and their involvement is AEW-centric now. So there's not too much of it. For a while there was. But in the end, you still want... I still think it's a problem with Okada. Is Okada presenting himself on the screen for somebody who doesn't care or know or had experienced in real time his reputation? Does he seem like a star right now? Like, for instance, Ibushi, everyone's focused on Ibushi, and they should be. He's the comeback kid. In terms of, like Zach Barber says in the chat, Kota Ibushi has somehow turned back the hands of time. He looks really good, and that's fine, but it's not Ibushi. He's not selling pay-per-view buys in a week and a half. It's Okada against Kenny. Is Okada recently, character work with Callis, this match with Ibushi, other in-ring work, Chris, is he showing himself to be a star for people who only care about what they've seen him do in AEW?
I would say no. I don't think he's been presented as a serious wrestler. He's kind of been like, he pals around with the Young Bucks. He wins most of his matches, but there's a lot of times where, putting aside being a fan of his previous work and watching him in New Japan before, he doesn't seem to be as interested or working as hard as perhaps a lot of the other people on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of it is with AEW's bookings, AEW has to book twofold. Yeah, the people who know the history are going to be into it at an extra level, but you need to get the people who are in it day to day to do that. When Omega, it may have been at World's End when they first had the thing where they pointed at the sign. When I think it was when Okada won the Continental Classic. That was when they kind of teased it, but then Okada should have been at that point more serious. Up until this point, he was the same guy until 2 weeks ago, and I just think that hurts people who don't have this New Japan knowledge from 2018.
Yeah. Adam Kidd says Okada has done nothing to make me care about him. Zach Barber said associating Okada with Callis helps with the seriousness. Boy, when you say Callis helps you with seriousness, I don't know. I mean, sometimes Callis feels a little less serious than a top heel manager should. I don't know. Maybe that's slightly I don't want to say my own comment that I just made 5 seconds ago slightly unfair, but I don't look at Callis as somebody who adds a ton of seriousness to acts. He's more of just a bombastic, agitating heel. But I get the point. Yeah, well, let me ask you about that. Like, is there anything you would have done different with the Okada Callis pairing, and how much is it a boost, and how much more of a boost could it be if some of those other changes were made in how they presented them?
I wouldn't have put Okada with Callis. I would have had, just because Callis has a billion people with him, and it,
and they're not all top tier guys.
They're all top tier. They kind of touch and go and pass through. Here's Josh Alexander. Here's Trent Beretta. Here's Rocky Romero. I would have booked Okada better for the last couple months. To me, it's weird that Okada is in a faction with the Young Bucks, and they're teaming with Takeshita. It's like, we have our own Japanese friend now. We don't need you. Mm-hmm. And then he's teaming with the Callis family. And I guess, I don't know if it's going to set something down the line, but I think it would have been, Callis already has a reputation. I would have either brought in someone new to manage Okada. I don't know who that would be. That's a fictional person. Or I would have actually thought about this few months in advance and made Okada a different character so that when he challenged Omega, he was looked at differently.
I think that's fair. Along the lines of Kyle Fasso, he goes, I think AEW waited too long to do anything of much substance with Okada. They should have brought him in and had him in the world title picture right away. It would make the New Japan hype seem real. By the way, Zach Barber just says Don Callis helped elevate Okada's seriousness in comparison to the Bucks, and I would agree with that.
I would agree too.
Yes, I'm sure you would. Derek Mitchell, and this is not a compliment, says Don Callis is today's version of Paul Jones in his Paul Jones Army. We're going back to the mid-'80s Jim Crockett Promotions. He has two legit upper-tier stars in Fletcher and Takeshita, while Okada feels less than. Josh Alexander is just a guy. Number one Paul Jones, that quintessential, like, number 2, number 3 manager in a territory. I think he's more Stokely is a better comparison. Let's see. I thought there's something else I wanted to add here, but maybe not. Oh yeah, this is it. Kyle Fessel said, we're getting into NWO territory with the Don Callis family. All great talents, but they're getting diluted. I mean, I feel like Don Callis, his whole run in AEW, except with Kenny, but it was too brief, and it even wasn't as fleshed out as it wanted, but it felt like that was the top of the company for a while. I just want Don Callis to stand in the ring with his entire group more often and define themselves the way MVP and Hurt Syndicate have been, the way Heyman and Seth and his crew do, the way the Bloodline, the way the Shield did. Like, they just don't create that visual unity enough, and they don't explore the dynamic between them. And I think the peak faction is like the Bloodline presentation, even the Judgment Day. Not that Judgment Day is a peak faction, but for a faction to reach peak level, whatever level they're aspiring to, you should get to know the dynamic between the different people in the group. And that it requires them to be seen together, interacting with each other, and in some cases, like, occasionally winning in an important match, which, Lance Archer just hasn't done. Lance Archer wins a match against nobody the week before he loses a match that we're supposed to think is important the next week, and that's been his pattern for the most part. So, yeah, I just want to see the Callis family on the screen more and see Callis step up and do the best work of his career, and he just can't quite come to Dynamite with the booking support and his own ideas and the TV time to flex what I think is unfulfilled potential with him and his crew. And I think you can redefine, as WWE has done with Bronson Reed, you can define somebody as a bigger deal or in a different way if the rest of the faction is rock solid and knows how to portray themselves well. And I don't know, Chris, how do you feel about the Don Callis family in general? You can relate it to Okada, of course, also.
Yeah, I think you can't have a faction with 6 or 7 people, have them all get over. And the Callis family has, Brian Cage is injured, but Lance Archer, Kyle Fletcher, Takeshita, Okada on loan, Josh Alexander, Rocky Romero, and Trent Beretta. You can't get all those people in the ring at the one time to stand together. I just think also they kind of should have them have separate feuds. It's kind of what I was talking before about the matches being too long. On some of these shows, you could have done those things where they are shown together or setting up a match, have Roppongi Vice go for a tag team title, or have Josh Alexander who's in a feud with Brody King. You could maybe talk about that, or about him preparing for the match and them looking after it. Small things like that on different shows. Not on this show this week. Obviously, they're preparing for All In. But week to week, those small things get that character development, get people to believe in factions more. So when they have their match against whoever, there's been a built-in story, a built-in kind of increased knowledge about whoever's been talked about.
Yeah. Zach Barber to the defense, I guess, of the Don Callis family. He said the DCF is layered. Fletcher, Takeshita, Okada are the top guys. Alexander's the mid-card. Archer is the muscle, and RPG Vice are the pin takers. Sure, that's true. That's factual. But they don't stand together in the ring and show any kind of unity or any kind of dynamic with each other. It just sort of happenstance and a little bit pasted together based on a variety of appearances. I don't know. Like, people used to be obsessed with getting complete protein, the whole amino acid chain in a single meal. It's a little outdated now, nutrition wise. As long as you get your complete amino acid profile over the course of a week, the results are the same. But that's why rice and beans historically are nutritionally linked. Even in cultures where it's largely a vegetarian or primarily vegetarian diet in the region, is because you get a complete protein with beans and rice. But you have to combine the two. In the Don Callis family, you never get the complete amino acid profile of this is a stretch, but I'm going with it. You never get the complete amino acid profile of the faction in one meal, in one sitting, in one show, in one segment. You have to piece it together over a month. And I just want them to all stand in the ring and see them all together, and have Callis be the leader, and have Okada stand right next to him, and have Takeshita and Fletcher playing off of each other a little bit, and have Archer clearly positioned the way. So Zach knows, he gets it. The pieces are there, but they just don't show you all at once. You kind of have to patch it and piece it together. And if you want to be a top level faction, and you have somebody who's obnoxious with the type of heel heat and talking ability that Callis has, get him out there and get in the Don Callis family business. And I think they come up short on that. I think they take for granted, everyone looks at it like Zach Barber, which is, I can piece it together over the course of a month or two. That's all I need. I wish they did it more overtly on TV regularly. Chris, you're muted. You're stealing my gimmick. I don't like that.
I hit the wrong button again.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying before about the matches. If the Mina, Monet, the 4-way, and the tag match, there's 12 minutes of character development you could have had for them or anyone else that they just don't do because they're so focused on long matches, which are great. But this is where it helps you down the line with that character development.
Very good. By the way, what do you think they should do with Ibushi going forward? Like, I mean, they probably put a ton of thought into it because they're just using him as sort of a piece to tell the story with Kenny. But what does this version of Ibushi, what is his value for AEW post All In?
It depends if he's there. I think Ibushi at this point of his career, with the injuries that he's had, is probably better as a special attraction. I know that might be costly to fly him over from Japan. I don't know. You'll have diminishing returns if he's on the show every single week. But I also think that you could have, again, this is kind of where Maybe you have him in a feud with someone like Takeshita or Fletcher or Alexander, someone from the Don Callis family. Maybe they attack him because he helped Omega in the match. And but I also would have him away for several times. I don't know if he can do the week-to-week schedule at this point.
Yep. All right, so let's talk about MJF against Brody King, against Anthony Bowens, against AR Fox, a 4-way for the number 2 spot in the Casino Gauntlet. Number 1 and number 2 are basically the same. I think the end result of this, MJF won in 13 minutes. I don't think it's predictable in the sense that he's clearly the biggest star in the match, but it's not predictable in the sense that he wouldn't have gotten eliminated from the match by losing. He just wouldn't get a prime spot where he's guaranteed a chance to win. It's convoluted rules. But you could have seen an upset that would set off MJF and make him angry. I mean, and MJF can still be in the Casino Battle Royal and could still win it. But him winning came across a little, and he wouldn't have to be involved in the finish either if he didn't win. So there are all kinds of reasons I didn't think this was predictable in the traditional way, but it still was the expected outcome. So the match itself did seem like Anthony Bowens and AR Fox were there to be extras. Brody King was the top threat, but as usual, Brody King is just a second-tier wrestler in every way, the way they feature him. And MJF got the win. So your thoughts about the match first, and we'll talk about the post-match angle.
Yeah, I thought the match was enjoyable. My only, we do a lot of 4-ways, 5-ways, 6-ways at Wrestling Coast to Coast, and it boggled my mind that in a match with one fall that, 2 guys were going outside the ring. I think Brody King chased MJF, and I just thought, why didn't AR Fox, or I wish AR Fox had rolled up Bowens for a 3 count in 1 in 10 seconds, because you only need 1 pinfall and you should actually focus on that. I know telling the story. I think this match is actually the way of what I was talking about, is that they're actually the 3 wrestlers that did not win are actually 3 wrestlers with talent that could play a role on the show, but there was no build up. Brody King, you knew who was going to get his spots. He's a bigger guy, but he wasn't going to win. The AR Fox is someone who, when he wrestles, the crowd gets more and more behind him. So he, to me, is your typical, should be mid-card babyface to get pushed, beat some people, and lose to bigger heels, but kind of doesn't do that. And Bowens, to me, has always been he was a talented wrestler, but he's kind of been lost in the shuffle. I just think it was good action, but it had an eventual the outcome was pretty clear.
So afterwards, we get a beatdown of Jet Speed, and another beatdown of Jet Speed, another beatdown of Jet Speed. The story being, you can't keep him down. They kept standing up and saying, "Bring it on." It showed a resilience and a perseverance to Jet Speed, but they also were manhandled. And for the most part, in a fair fight in terms of 2-on-2. So at first I was like, why are Shelton and Lashley just beating down the babyface challengers when MVP laughed and mocked? I thought, at a bad decision by MVP, just laughed at the idea of them being even threats to them. But if the story is they're underestimating them, and if Jet Speed ultimately win in part because of that, because 1, they were underestimated, but 2, they're better. They're just simply better than Benjamin and Lashley and MVP and MJF figured, and they get a win in the end. I like that. I think I'm for Jet Speed getting the tag team titles. It's not, if Hurt Syndicate keep it and there's a good reason and we see it play out, I'm not against it. I don't think there's a right or wrong move, but I kind of lean towards fans like Jet Speed, and in a way that goes beyond their push or their character development. Why not roll with it? And I think it would be a credible win. And the way they've built this up is kind of pointing that direction, but I don't trust the booking formula to hold true, because it is, or I shouldn't say hold true. I don't trust the booking formula that often is used, which is babyfaces who are going to win get beat down in the buildup to create a sense of jeopardy, so their win from underneath as underdogs is all the more exciting and glorious and satisfying. This also could just be Jet Speed are a jobber tag team who are just there to take some bumps to help put Hurt Syndicate over, and that's a story that they're telling, but they're giving them a little out by having Kevin Knight keep standing up from a beatdown. So what did you think of this, and what do you think they're going for, and how do you feel about what happens at All In, Chris?
Yeah, well, I think they kind of have to win. Assuming that they set up that Knight challenge Benjamin at Collision, and he's going to win by some fluke, and that's going to be why the Hurt Syndicate should will give them the challenge, make them challenge for the titles at All In, or they could just obviously ask the Young Bucks or Tony Khan. That might be easier. But I think to me that beatdown, I liked it, but I think it went one beat too long because at the end of it, the crowd started chanting for the Hurt Syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had the first 2 times they had sympathy. I think they kind of went a bit too far. But I like the thing. I also like giving Knight, who's a pretty impressive wrestler. I've seen him at New Japan, TNA, other places, kind of give him a bit of a personality.
Mm-hmm.
I think that helps.
We did get another reference to kill. You got to kill us. Yeah. And
which they almost did. So I don't know.
There's that too. What about the argument that saying you're going to kill someone, as Ramen Noodle says, I feel like you're going to have to kill me as a colloquialism that kind of transcended the literal interpretation of that phrase. Yeah, but I also prefer a more subtle Hangman promo than saying you're going to have to kill me. What do you make of that argument that, hey, no one takes it literally, so who cares if they say it as just a figure of speech?
This is a promotion that has had people put bags over people's heads, stab people, throw them off very high objects onto the floor, hit people with chairs over the head, which all in a non-wrestling world could lead to death. Even all those moves is why I tell you not to try that at home. So I think part of it is, if you're going to be a sport and these moves are supposed to hurt, I don't think you should take it to that extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think it's unnecessary, especially since, you're trying. I mean, this is a promotion where they've burned people's houses down, they've broken into people's homes, they put bags over people's heads. So I just wouldn't go there.
Also, if you're an MMA fighter and you say, I'm going to beat you so badly that you're never going to be able to step foot in the octagon again, physically or mentally, I'm going to break you. Okay. I mean, that's not saying I'm going to kill you, and that feels within the realm of possibility, but it also means when you win, you haven't really won yet, because you have to wait to see if the person you beat ever steps foot in the octagon again, physically or is able to mentally. So what you do is you raise the stakes so high that winning the match suddenly feels sort of minor compared to the larger thing you claimed. And so, but if people don't take death seriously, then, and it's just a figure of speech, then to what ends are you saying it? Like, what's the point of saying it? So you can say, yeah, they've actually, what you said they do, but at the same time, it's like nobody believes, and this was Scott Hall told me in the Torch Talk I did with him, nearly 2 decades ago. It's like, no one believes you're going to kill anyone, so stop saying it. Talk about stakes that people can relate to and are realistic. And when you say, you need to kill me or I'm going to kill you, and it's worse when you say I'm going to kill you, I think it's better. It's way less of an offense for someone to say, you're going to have to kill me to stop me. What I don't like is when you say, I'm not just going to beat you, I'm going to kill you. I think that's over the top ridiculous. But it just sets the bar so high, and everybody knows you're not going to do it. So now what am I watching the match for? The stakes, the claim of what's going to happen is so over the top and ridiculous that I'm not buying it. And then when you add in, well, but hey, they tried to suffocate someone and burn their house down. Well, right, but that just feels hack and fake. Like, it's so out of the realm of pro wrestling. So the idea is make the titles or the pride of winning a match what we're all here for. That should be enough. Anytime it has to be more than that, you're needlessly undercutting the essential premise of what makes almost every other feud count, which is what I didn't like about the pipe bomb promo from CM Punk. The aspect of it I didn't like is, oh, so that promo's real, but all the other ones are fake. It's hard to get back into that mode. So I just say stay within the parameters of the stories you tell and let winning be the be-all, end-all, because that's how it is in sports. In sports, you don't get to the championship game, and it's like anything more than I want to beat you and win the trophy. That's what people tune in for. Don't raise the stakes beyond that, because it diminishes the value of the thing that is actually more relatable to the fans and fits in the narrative better.
Yeah, the goal is to win.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So, yeah. All right. Anything else on MJF's performance and his role in that match and the angle?
No, I did wonder if they were going to bring up MJF attacking
Mystico
at the MLW show.
Yep.
Nearby where I used to live in Queens. I know AEW does those things for viral moments on the internet, but to me, if you're going to do it, you should promote it on your show, or maybe they don't want to do it because Mystico's not going to be in the Battle Royal, but they should have mentioned that.
Yep. All right. Zach Barber, in relation to our last chat, says wrestling isn't always about championships, though. What about those pesky personal rivalries? Well, that's why I said it's about titles and it's about the pride of winning a match. And the pride of winning a match, it should be what the personal rivalry is about. There's no title at stake, but I am going to take great joy in beating you because we're professional wrestlers. It is what we're best at. We're on national television, and I think I'm tougher than you. You think you're tougher than me. And guess what? I don't just want to prove I'm better than I won't just take pride in winning a match. I will take extra pride in beating you because I don't like you. And here's why. And then you obviously you add all the color. You fill that's just a paint by numbers outline. You fill in all the color with all the details. But yes, the pesky personal rivalry should not be settled based on someone saying, I'm going to kill you, because now you've eliminated any chance that there will be a payoff that matches the threat. And that's just stupid. It's hack. It's desperate. It's undisciplined. It's immature. It's all these things. You just tell the story within the lines.
And on the show, the two people that mentioned kill and death are actually people fighting for title fighting for titles. So that's what makes it even worse.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Let's go to JB's email to round things out here. Does Mox Hangman need the Texas Deathmatch stipulation at All In? Good question we haven't addressed. I'm actually in favor of it in the sense that the match was likely to have a lot of interference by nature of its build, and the deathmatch allows for the interference rather than making the referees and wrestlers look like morons. So what do you think about Texas Death for this? Should the world title be enough? Is this Moxley? Is this Tony Khan catering to Moxley, or Moxley falling back on his comfort zone as a wrestler, which is not wrestling within the ropes, within the rules, but use all the bells and whistles? I mean, that's his playground. He likes that.
I think that the match is going to have a lot of run-ins anyway, so you might as well.
But they'll be
them
exactly. That's at least referees don't need me to look stupid, which is JB's point. At least we know what's going to happen, so at least now we don't need a dumb referee being dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did this guy come from the side? I didn't see him, and it's going to have probably 10 people more. You may even see someone maybe debut or something show up. So yeah, this will allow that to happen.
All right, JB says, I also think the buckshot lariat to Marina Shafir was justified due to her constant attacks on Hangman and other male wrestlers on the roster. It wasn't out of nowhere and purely for a pop like a random stunner. It had a purpose. It was deserved and was designed to show Hangman is willing to go to dark places to take the title back from Mox. I agree. You covered that earlier, Chris. You've seen enough in the NDC, and the male-female, intergender matches isn't as shocking. Marina Shafir is badass. She's not a valet. It's not. I told Steve Austin this. I said I didn't like when he was giving stunners to women, and I don't think doing it for a cheap pop from fans who is good. And whole other thing too is I don't think some women who get beat down by wrestlers should never get up again from them if you want the finisher to count. I don't like the stunner being given to people as sort of a
next Stacy Keibler,
especially her. Yes. I don't think a finisher should be treated as sort of a haha moment. I mean, I think it should be protected more than that. I don't like, yeah. So, but anyway, that's a sidebar topic. But as far as Shafir goes, I thought, yeah, she's getting physically involved over and over again. She's portrayed as a badass and tough. And Hangman did it not for a cheap pop, but to send a storyline message. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things that has to be done sparingly. And, we talked about AEW not building up other wrestlers in the past, but this is an example of where building her up over the course of the last several months as being someone who interferes kind of makes it make sense in this moment.
All right, JB says, the photos of Tony Storm in the bottom of Mercedes' boots during a TBS title match was a very nice comedic touch. I don't remember having ever seen that before. I wish we would have gotten Tony on commentary, though, rather than simply being at ringside, but I understand they might not have wanted to take attention away from the in-ring action. I actually think Mercedes should have lost the TBS title tonight due to some sort of cheating that was thwarted by Tony and backfired on Mercedes. So a few points there. What do you think of Tony not being on, not commenting, but just observing?
She seemed very subdued as someone who's had this kind of gregarious personality in this gimmick. It seemed like she was in a trance, and she really didn't do anything. It just other than sit there and kind of hope for Mina to win. I think the email makes a good point, but I think a lot of it depends on who's going to win the match, because if Mercedes is going to win, which I assume, then it doesn't make sense for her to lose, or it may not make sense for her to lose here. But I'm assuming that she's going to win anyway, so you can have more belts.
What did we think of the heroes versus villains branding for Superman on tonight's episode? I was okay with it since it was basically isolated to match graphics. Yeah, I was fine with it.
It was fine, but as I said, I believe last year when I saw Mercedes Moné at the Franklin Park Conservatory. I believe she was with Beast Mortos, now Public, and he smiled at my kid, so he's not a villain to me.
The idea that MJF couldn't be counted out of the Fatal 4-Way match was idiotic. This nonsense is what makes me hate multi-wrestler matches more than anything. I could, if I could wave a magic wand and change the rules of 3- and 4-way matches, it'd be that if you can get disqualified and then it becomes a 3-way, becomes a 2-way, or a 4-way becomes a 3-way. If you get counted out or disqualified, you're out. It's easy. I just don't think is there a downside to that? And then there shouldn't be anything goes. It's just so ludicrous that if you add a third or fourth person to a match, then anything goes. I mean, anything goes matches are stupid to begin with, because if anything goes, then you're willing to go to really resort to incredible violence or everybody on earth helping you who's on your team. Why wait till the 17-minute mark to do it? Just do it at the beginning. I mean, and I know there's a lot of nonsense in wrestling in terms of if you think too hard about it. Alfred Hitchcock called it a refrigerator movie. When you watched it, you enjoyed it, but when you got home and went to the fridge, you said, wait, that didn't make any sense. And you start thinking about plot holes. Yeah. Pro wrestling is like that in so many ways that you can't change. But I think you should avoid it when possible, and when it's just indisputably a better choice. And in this case, making 3- and 4-way matches where someone can get DQ'd and knocked out of the match or get counted out just makes sense. And that's the trap. That's the escape hatch that bookers want in these matches that makes them anything goes, but you could accomplish it in a different way. You don't need everybody to be pinned or submitted in order to make sense of it. Just do DQs. Anyway, Chris, I talk about this a lot, but it comes up here in this instance that JB brings up.
I mean, we, again, on Wrestling Coast to Coast, we do a lot of scramble matches, and there's a formula to them where, people do moves left and right until basically everyone gets knocked out except the finish. I don't think it's helpful, but I also think as a TV product for AEW and WWE, it helps to get multiple people in a match, so they can be on the show. But yeah, I just think it takes away from, when ECW did it was a novelty. What was that, mid-90s? But it's kind of gone too far.
Back to JB says, we have to see Jet Speed standing tall at least once before their tag title match at All In for credibility's sake, right? And not just after constant beatdowns. I think if next week Jet Speed get the better of Hurt Syndicate, it's going to be a sign that they're losing. I think if they don't and Hurt Syndicate mock and demean and maybe beat them up again, I think they're telling the story of they're going for a Jey Uso Royal Rumble pop, a Jey Uso beating Gunther pop. They're going for this underdog team that fans have an affection for, scoring a super satisfying upset. And the way to tell that story is to have it look like they have no chance going into the pay-per-view, and then overcome the odds one way or the other. And then if they do, I hope they kind of win clean. But we have Kevin Knight and Shelton next week 1-on-1. So there's going to be a story told there. My hunch is it's Kevin Knight getting a win over Shelton with some shenanigans, and it won't mean anything. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's going to be some sort of fluke win that gives the Hurt Syndicate, the impetus to give them a tag match at All In.
JB covers the point about Ospreay and Swerve. He said, I'm glad that Ospreay Swerve acknowledged they're essentially dropping the EVP titles if they win at All In, but the Cody stipulation is an interesting wrinkle. I think that it telegraphs an Ospreay Swerve win at All In. I think we covered that. I think you can talk yourself into it either way, that it's a way to take Tony Khan off the hook for Ospreay getting a title shot until next year's All In, and get Swerve off. What you don't want is to define Swerve down as somebody who the booker has chosen in a meta sense or in storyline sense is not on the world title picture. But if you want Hangman to have a clear runway to be the centerpiece babyface world champion, you don't want people going, well, I'd rather have Swerve. If you write a storyline in where Swerve and Ospreay can't, it does give pure space for Hangman to be that guy for a year. And so I think it's believable that happens. But the way the Bucks were flaunting EVP status makes you think, yeah, They're too cocky. It's going to get taken away, and that's just the way they're going. So I think it works either way. Chris, anything you want to add to that?
This is the booking. Is like, is there a better opponent or that for Adam Page than Swerve or Will Ospreay? I feel like those are two of the top opponents in the world of AEW. So if you took them away, you have to build up a few people to be credible opponents for him, because those are two, rematches I think a lot of fans would be interested in.
100%. But if you don't have that, but you book heels against Hangman anyway, and you're leapfrogging or passing by Ospreay and Swerve, that's ridiculous. So if you have the problem either way, you might as well have a storyline reason why you're going to the third and fourth best option instead of the first and second best option to challenge for the world title, which is Ospreay and Swerve. And that puts maybe Okada in the mix. Kenny's still there, but Kenny feels more special attraction than why isn't he world champion at this point? MJF, if he wins his gauntlet match. So I think they can fill some time with and build up some heels, but you're right. They got some work to do. Hopefully that is in the plans for Tony Khan, and it still might feel a little too late to get the full benefit. All right. Why would the Bucks care if Ospreay and Swerve can wrestle for the AEW Championship? The Bucks are tag wrestlers. Yeah, we covered that. I mean, I thought the same thing, but I think the Bucks just want to make life miserable and take something away that means something to Swerve and Ospreay, and they think since they're not getting along, they can make that happen, and they'll delight in good guys like Swerve and Ospreay, having something taken away. Finally, was tonight the right time for Kenny Omega to return from his attack angle at the contract signing? As always, love the show and go VIP. Should they have saved that for next week, Chris? Just that's the final hard sell?
No, I don't want it's one of the big matches on the show. I don't think you want fans to question if it's going to happen.
Yep. I think that's a good point. Yep. Very good. Is there anything else, Chris, from this show that you want to bring up?
No, I think I've hit everything. I think I've angered enough people in the chat.
That's fine. I mean, yeah. Angry chat room is an interesting chat room. Very good. Okay. So we have VIP membership. If you are not supporting us with a VIP membership, we wish you would. How's that? PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Tons of exclusive content. Over 35 years of archives of the Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter, long-form Torch Talk interviews with some of Pro Wrestling's biggest names on camera and off. Weekly lineup of VIP exclusive shows that I think is second to none. If you like our tone on this show, our kind of mature adult, journalistically based approach to what to how we cover wrestling instead of, pro rah-rah taking sides or bombastic over-the-top commentary and hot takes. You'll find a lot more of that on the VIP side of things. There's a whole batch of shows. You can customize the feed. So if you don't have time to listen to everything we produce, which is understandable, you can subscribe to specific shows with a full VIP membership on Apple Podcasts or any major podcast app. You can also subscribe through Spotify or Patreon. Just search PWTorch VIP in Spotify or Patreon. You get a 7-day free trial if you go that approach. That just unlocks our VIP shows in a single feed. So it doesn't have the benefits of the full VIP membership where you can customize a feed. It doesn't give you ad-free access to our website or archives. But if you're mainly here for podcasts and you want ad-free versions of our free shows like this one where the commercial breaks are skipped past, and you want to get the VIP exclusives like post-pay-per-view roundtables, Evix with Todd Martin, Greg Parks Out Loud, Alan Forel's Pro Wrestling Paradise, NXT 8 Years Back, check it out. PWTorch VIP is the search term in Patreon or Spotify. But again, full details on all the options at pwtorch.com/GoVIP. If you are not going to go VIP, be sure you're at least checking out all our free options. Search Wade Keller and search PWTorch in your podcast app and subscribe to those. And that includes Wrestling Coast to Coast. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. Fun conversation talking AEW for a change.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Wrestling
Absolutely.
Coast to Coast.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody in the chat. And be sure to like our show, comment below if you're watching us on demand or on the podcast side of things. And please subscribe to our channel. Just search PWTorch on YouTube if you haven't yet. And if you're on the podcast side of things, maybe take a moment, give us a 5-star rating, and leave some comments in whatever app you're listening to us in. That is always appreciated. Thanks, everybody. Check out the flagship on our Blue Logo show on Thursday night. And then I'll be back for the SmackDown post show with fireworks in the background scaring my dog It's so sad. He's so scared of fireworks. It's his least favorite day of the year. But I did, by the way, Chris, I took on, for the first time ever, paddleboarding today. I bought a paddleboard, tried it out. I did not fall. I stood. I was proud. And then my dog wanted to jump on it, and he did. And he went paddleboarding for the first time, too. So it's a good week for him, but he doesn't know this yet, but it's going to end poorly because he is going to hide behind the toilet in the bathroom. That's where he goes whenever he hears thunder or fireworks. So, but I'll be doing the SmackDown Post Show Friday night.
Friday's tough for pets. I've already seen here in Ohio, cities issuing advisories for what people to do Friday night. And here in Columbus, we have the Red, White, and Boom, which is a big one. They do that on the 3rd, and then all the cities around do it on the 4th. So it might be a rough couple of days for. So look after your pets the next couple of days.
Yeah, I know it's rough. All right, thanks everybody, and we'll talk to you all next time.